She signed my name on a scholarship meant for me. She wore my clothes, took my future. I watched her stand under the lights, smile for cameras, and accept praise for a life she stole. But what she didn't know, my name was still on the legal documents, and I didn't scream. I didn't fight her publicly. I just let the court do the talking, and when it spoke, it erased every lie she ever told. My name is Natalie Brooks. I was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina, the kind of place where everyone knows your grandmother's pie recipe, and your last name matters more than your GPA. I used to think family meant safety, that the people who share your blood would never betray you. I was wrong. You see, I have a cousin, Amelia Green, older than me by 2 years. Blonde, graceful, always smiling like she knew a secret. And maybe she did. Maybe she always knew how to take what she wanted and get away with it. We were close when we were kids. Sleepovers, summer popsicles, matching dresses at Easter. But somewhere around high school, something shifted. She stopped including me and started comparing herself. Still, I never thought she'd steal something that mattered. When my grandmother passed away, everything changed. Gran wasn't rich, but she was proud. And she had a college fund she quietly built just for me. She told me once, Natalie, you're the only one who listens. That money's for your future, baby. It wasn't much, just enough to cover tuition at the University of South Carolina. Law track. I'd been dreaming of that since I was 15. I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, earned my way in. So when the scholarship office called to say they never received my acceptance confirmation, my heart stopped. I rushed home, dug through emails, rechecked every envelope. Then I called the university, and they told me something I still can't believe. Natalie Brooks already accepted the grant. She's enrolled. Excuse me, that was my name, my grant, my spot. I drove to campus that day, heart racing, palms sweating, and that's where I saw her. Amelia, wearing my grandmother's necklace, walking out of the admin building holding a welcome packet, the same one that should have had my name on it. She saw me, she froze, then smiled. And just like that, I knew she had taken my identity just enough to secure the scholarship. Used my address from Gran's will, forged the signature, and because we look a little alike, no one questioned it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag her into the street and tell the world, but I didn't, because something deeper than rage hit me that day. I felt erased. I went home, sat in my car for over an hour, couldn't cry, couldn't speak, just stared at the steering wheel like it had all the answers. My parents didn't believe me. They said, "Are you sure? Natalie Amelia's always been ambitious, but she wouldn't do that." I showed them the emails, the missing documents, the fact that my student ID wasn't working. They said, "Let's not cause drama. We're family." Family. The word rang in my ears like a punch. I was suffocating in the silence. A week later, Amelia was on stage at a scholarship banquet, smiling, wearing a suit she borrowed from my closet years ago. They called her name, my name, and everyone clapped. That moment broke something in me. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the opportunity. It was the violation of top me. And yet I stayed quiet, because I had a plan. I just didn't know it yet. But something inside whispered, "Wait, watch, remember?" And I did. There's something haunting about watching someone live your life. Wearing your name, stepping into the spaces you fought to earn, and smiling like they belong there. Amelia didn't just take my scholarship. She took my reflection, my voice. Everywhere I turned, she was already ahead of me because she stole my start. But I wasn't ready to burn everything down just yet. Instead, I started documenting. I saved every email I'd exchanged with the scholarship board, printed the confirmation letters with the timestamps. I dug through my grandmother's records and found the original trust document, my name, in her handwriting. I opened an old shoebox Gran had kept under her bed. Inside was a handwritten list. She titled it "For Natalie." My heart stopped. It listed every dollar she'd set aside over the years, every bank transfer, every bond cashed. It wasn't just sentimental, it was evidence. I took pictures, scanned everything, labeled and backed up every file in 3 different drives. Amelia might have gotten the spotlight, but I had the receipts. The night before classes officially started, I saw her again, this time at the bookstore. She was laughing with a group of girls, arms full of books bought with my money. I stood 2 aisles over silent, watching. She didn't see me, but that's the thing about silence. It makes you invisible until it doesn't. I walked out that night without confronting her, because I had decided this wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about justice. I booked a consultation with a lawyer from Greenville, Elena Rhodes. She was sharp, cold, no nonsense. After I told her the story, she leaned back in her chair and asked one question. Do you want to ruin her or reclaim what's yours? I answered without blinking. Both. She smiled for the first time. We got to work. First, identity verification. I signed a sworn affidavit attesting to my identity and the fact that I never accepted the scholarship. Then we submitted a formal petition to the university's financial aid department, demanding a fraud investigation. Within 48 hours, they froze Amelia's tuition disbursement. She called me that night. I didn't pick up. The voicemail was pitiful. Natalie, what are you doing? You don't understand. I needed this. You always had Gran's favor. Can't I just have this one thing? She ended with, I'm sorry, but please don't take this from me. The irony nearly choked me. She had taken everything and wanted me to leave the pieces with her. But the thing about stolen things is, they come with consequences. 2 days later, the university issued a request for additional documentation. Elena and I delivered everything. Handwritten notes, voice memos from Gran, time-stamped videos, a letter from our family lawyer verifying Gran's intent. It was airtight. Amelia's file was shredded before midterms. They didn't just revoke her scholarship. They flagged her student profile for fraud. She couldn't access campus systems. She couldn't register for classes. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but what I felt was empty. Because despite it all, I still remembered us as children. 2 girls eating frozen grapes on the porch. 2 girls who once promised we'd never let anyone come between us. Now there was a canyon too wide to cross. The story made its way through the family like wildfire. Some called me cruel. Some called me brave. But none of them called Amelia a thief. And that told me everything I needed to know about loyalty. My parents kept their distance. They said they didn't want to pick sides, but not picking a side is still a choice. It was lonely, but it was also clarifying. I moved forward with my own application on time. Under my real name, the university expedited my acceptance. The dean himself wrote me a letter of apology. They offered me an additional stipend to cover what had been lost. But I didn't smile, not yet. Not until Amelia showed up at my apartment one night, rain-soaked and shaking. She had the audacity to say, "You could have just asked me to stop." I laughed. A bitter, aching kind of laugh. Then I said the words I had waited months to say. "You didn't ask when you took it." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, looking like a shadow of the person she pretended to be. Before she turned to leave, she whispered, "It was never about the money. It was about being seen." I closed the door, locked it, and finally exhaled. Because I realized something. Amelia didn't need the scholarship. She needed to feel like she mattered more than me. And now, everyone knew the truth. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to fight. I just let the truth speak for itself. And that was louder than anything I could have shouted. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Amelia disappeared from family gatherings, from social media, from the world she once tried so hard to impress. But I wasn't fooled. People like her don't go away. They regroup. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, she showed up at our aunt's birthday party, head held high like nothing had happened. She wore a new dress, new makeup, new lies. Someone whispered, "She's applying to a different school out of state." I didn't care. Because this time, I wasn't watching her. I was watching me. How I carried myself. How I no longer needed approval from people who stayed silent when I was erased. I was rebuilding, not just my education, but my sense of worth. Each morning, I woke up, made coffee, and opened my law textbooks with a hunger I'd never felt before. I wasn't just learning the law. I was becoming the kind of woman who could wield it. With precision, with patience, with power. Sometimes, I'd think about Gran, wonder what she would have said. Then I'd hear her voice, clear as day. "Baby, you ain't gotta fight ugly with ugly. Just be undeniable." So I stayed focused. Midterms came, then finals. And when grades were posted, I was top of my class. Not because I was better than anyone, But because I earned every inch of that place, by the end of the semester, a professor pulled me aside. She said, "You've got fire in you. I read your case briefs. Ever thought about judicial work?" I smiled, a real smile, not out of spite, but out of pride. Because in the end, Amelia gave me something she never meant to. She gave me a reason to fight harder, to rise higher, and when I did, it wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about proving myself right. I wasn't just a girl who lost her scholarship. I was a woman who reclaimed her name and built a future no one could forge. The letter came on a Thursday, a formal, university-sealed envelope addressed to Miss Natalie Brooks. My hands trembled before I even opened it. Not because I feared what was inside, but because I knew. This was the moment everything shifted. Inside was the official ruling. The university's Board of Ethics had concluded their investigation. Fraudulent misrepresentation, unauthorized use of identity, violation of institutional trust. Those were the words they used. And under it all, a final declaration. Effective immediately, Amelia Green is expelled from the University of South Carolina, and all academic records related to the scholarship in question have been nullified. I stared at that sentence for a long time, not out of celebration, but from something colder, sharper. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it arrived in black ink on white paper. And this was justice. I folded the letter, placed it in a file marked Truth, and slid it into my drawer. The next day, I walked across campus with my head high. The sky was overcast. The air carried a quiet that felt sacred. And then I saw her, Amelia, standing alone by the administration office. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun. Her eyes, once full of false confidence, now sunken and puffy. She saw me, didn't run, didn't speak. She just stared. And in that stare was everything she didn't know how to say. I walked past her, silent, because nothing I could say would match the silence she gave me when she signed my name. But that wasn't the end. 2 weeks later, a letter came from the state board. Turns out, the university had reported the case to the Office of Student Aid Integrity. Amelia's actions were under federal review. Misusing government funds, that's not just academic misconduct. That's a felony. And just like that, her future turned to dust. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw a party. But I did light a candle that night. For Gran, for myself, for the girl who was once too scared to speak. She wasn't gone. She was standing right here. And she had learned something priceless. The law doesn't just punish the guilty. It protects the silent. Over the next few months, things moved quickly. I got accepted into the Legal Ethics Mentorship Program. I published my first article in the Student Law Journal. I even received a handwritten note from Professor Langston, one of the toughest, most respected faculty on campus. He wrote, "You have a rare kind of fire. Let it burn what's false, but keep it warm enough to light the way for others." That sentence stayed with me, because the truth is, Amelia wasn't the first to lie. She just got caught. The system had failed too. No one verified my signature. No one double-checked the mailing address. No one called me when the application looked suspicious. They believed her because she looked the part, because she smiled more, because she was louder. But now, they believed me because I showed them what truth looks like when it's documented. Amelia's parents tried to intervene. They sent emails, threatened to sue the university for defamation. But the university responded with 3 simple attachments: my grandmother's will, the scholarship trust, and the surveillance footage of Amelia removing letters from Gran's mailbox. After that, they went quiet. For good. Sometimes I wondered what Amelia did after. Did she move, start over, change her name? But I never checked, because I was done letting her live in my head. She had taken enough. My energy now belonged to something greater, becoming the kind of lawyer who could make sure this never happened to anyone else. I joined the Student Legal Aid Clinic that spring. My first case was a girl whose ex-boyfriend stole her identity to open a credit line. She cried in my office for 20 minutes before she could speak. I just sat there, holding a tissue box, thinking, I know this pain. I've lived it. But you won't go through it alone. Together, we filed a police report, got the debt reversed. And 3 weeks later, she came back with flowers and said, "You believed me when no one else did." And that was the moment I knew my story wasn't just revenge. It was redemption. It was a blueprint for anyone who'd ever been silenced by someone smiling in their place. By the time finals rolled around, I had a new rhythm to my days. Up at 6 a.m., run by the lake, coffee, law books, clinic cases. and before bed one quiet promise to myself: never forget who you are. Never let them write your name in someone else's ink again. I kept Gran's list, the one titled "For Natalie," in my wallet. It was crumpled now, but the handwriting was clear. And so was the truth. She saw something in me before I did. And even though she was gone, she was right. I wasn't meant to be small. I wasn't meant to stay silent. And I sure as hell wasn't meant to be replaced. So when the news broke that Amelia had pleaded guilty to financial misconduct, I didn't cheer. I didn't text anyone. I just whispered, "It's done." Because it wasn't about destroying her. It was about restoring me. And that was everything. A week later, something unexpected arrived in my inbox. It was an invitation from the South Carolina Young Legal Advocates Association. They wanted me to speak, not because of my grades, not because of my resume, but because someone had anonymously submitted my story. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to stand on a stage and reopen the wound. But then I remembered something Elena once told me: if you don't tell your story, someone else will, and they'll get it wrong. So I said yes. The event was in Columbia, in an auditorium not far from where Amelia once stood pretending to be me. This time, the seat had my name on it, properly spelled, formally engraved. When I stepped onto that stage, I didn't see just an audience. I saw a sea of stories like mine, faces that had been overlooked, names that had been twisted, souls that had learned to carry injustice quietly. And for the first time, I gave them mine out loud. I told them what it felt like to be replaced, to be erased, and then to rise. The room was silent when I finished, not because they didn't care, but because they did, and silence finally felt sacred, not suffocating. Afterward, a law clerk named David came up to me. He said, "I've read hundreds of case files, but your voice, your human clarity, reminded me why I started law in the first place." That stuck with me, because the law isn't just paperwork. It's people, and I'd become someone worth listening to, not because of what was stolen, but because of what I reclaimed. My voice, my name, my place. It didn't happen all at once. Amelia's life didn't explode in some dramatic courtroom meltdown. It crumbled. Quietly, piece by piece, whispers first, then silence, and finally absence. After the federal investigation concluded, Amelia pled guilty to 1 count of financial aid fraud. It was a deal. No jail time, but 5 years of probation, community service, and a black mark that would follow her into every job interview, every application, every corner of adulthood she once thought she'd conquer. I never saw her in court. I wasn't required to testify, but I saw the transcript. The judge said, "Miss Green, you didn't just steal money. You stole trust. You stole a future that wasn't yours to take." And that line, it stayed with me, because it was the first time someone said it publicly. The truth, spoken in a room she couldn't charm her way out of. After that, Amelia vanished. No social media, no calls, no apologies. Just a name that used to echo through family dinners, now reduced to a strained silence when someone brought her up. Some people tried to act like nothing happened. Others avoided me altogether. But I didn't care, because by then, I had built something stronger than their approval. I had built peace. It wasn't glamorous. It looked like early mornings with strong coffee and cold case briefs. It sounded like clicking keys in a quiet dorm room, and it felt solid, unshakable, like the ground beneath me was finally mine. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Sometimes, I'd pass by a cafe we used to go to as kids. Sometimes I'd hear a laugh that sounded like hers, and for a second, just a second, I'd forget. I'd think about the version of us that never existed. The version where she stood beside me at law school graduation. The version where she celebrated me instead of impersonating me. But grief isn't always for the dead. Sometimes it's for the living who chose the wrong road. And Amelia, she drove off it with both hands on the wheel. A few months later, I heard from her brother. He called late after midnight, said she was living with an old friend in Atlanta, working part-time at a bookstore, trying to keep her head down. He said she cried a lot, but not for what she did, for what she lost, and somehow that hurt worse, because it meant she still didn't get it. She mourned her consequences, not the damage she caused. Still, I thanked him for the call, and I hung up without asking for more, because I had nothing left to give her. Not pity, not forgiveness, not even curiosity. I was too busy building my life. By the time my second year started, I had interned with the district attorney's office, sat in on real cases, written legal memos with my name at the top, no one else's. I got invited to be a panelist at a seminar titled Restoring Trust and Academic Integrity. Funny, right? The girl who was once erased now helping shape the policies that protect others from erasure. One night after the seminar, a first-year student approached me. Her voice shook as she said, "I heard about your story. I just wanted you to know. I'm here because of you." I blinked. Hard. Because for all the speeches, for all the courtroom wins, that was the moment it all made sense. My pain had planted something, and now it was blooming in someone else's courage. That spring, I got a letter. Handwritten, no return address. But the handwriting, I recognized it. It was Amelia's. Just 3 lines. "I'm sorry. I ruined more than I understood. I hope you never have to think of me again." No name. No explanation. Just that. And for the first time, I felt nothing. Not rage. Not sadness. Just closure. Because maybe that was the final chapter. Not a reunion. Not redemption. Just distance. And peace. In May, I stood on a stage that finally belonged to me. I wore a black robe. Held a diploma that carried only my name. And when they called it Natalie Brooks, I walked forward. Every step was heavy with memory. Every breath, a small resurrection. But I smiled. Not for the cameras. Not for the applause. For me. Because I had survived a theft most people never even see. Theft of identity. Theft of legacy. But I took it back. Quietly. Legally. Completely. And that day, as I tossed my cap into the air, I made myself one last promise. You will never shrink again. You will never let someone borrow your brilliance, only to burn it in their name. You will rise, alone if necessary, but never silent, never small, never stolen again. That summer, I stayed in Charleston, not because I had to, but because I wanted to walk the streets that once felt too small for me and reclaim them. I visited Gran's grave, sat on the old wooden bench near the willow tree she used to love. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "It's done," because it was the fight, the silence, the ache. All of it had led me here. And now, the only thing left to do was live. I took on a local legal project helping low-income families apply for rightful benefits. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And it reminded me that the law could be more than a shield, it could be a bridge. One day, I helped a woman named Teresa file paperwork after her landlord illegally evicted her. She'd been living in her car with 2 kids. I walked her through the process, filed the forms, called the courthouse myself. And when the ruling came back in her favor, she hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs would break. "You didn't just help me," she said. "You reminded me I mattered." And in that moment, I realized every time I fought for someone else, I reclaimed a part of myself. Piece by piece. Not just the Natalie who lost something, but the Natalie who became something. Stronger, sharper, softer in all the right places. I wasn't perfect, but I was whole. And as I packed for my final year of law school, I smiled for the first time in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd healed. And that was the truest kind of justice. There's a moment when silence turns into power. Not fear, not shame, but real grounded power. For me, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday. I was walking across the marble floor of the state courthouse in Columbia, heels clicking, breath steady. My name was on the docket, not as a victim, not as a defendant, but as counsel. Natalie Brooks, legal advocate. 3 years ago, that name was a whisper spoken behind closed doors, misused by someone who didn't earn it. Now, it was spoken aloud, correctly, respectfully, by judges, by clients, by peers. I took my place, and it was mine. That case pro bono was a domestic abuse claim. A woman fighting for her child, fighting to stay in the home her ex tried to take. I looked at her and saw the version of myself who once had to prove she belonged. And I promised, we'll fight smart, we'll fight quiet, but we will win. We did. Not in a big, dramatic fashion, but in a simple ruling, signed by a judge who saw the facts clearly. That woman cried in the hallway, said she hadn't slept in months. And I told her, "You can sleep now, you're safe." Helping her didn't erase what happened to me, but it turned my pain into purpose. And that was more powerful than any courtroom victory. Later that month, I was nominated for the South Carolina Rising Justice Award. I didn't expect it, didn't campaign for it, but someone had seen my work, had read my articles, had listened to the stories I helped bring into the light. When they called my name at the ceremony, I felt a deep stillness inside. Not nerves, not shock, just a quiet knowing. I stepped up, took the microphone, and said the truth out loud. I know what it feels like to be unseen. I know what it means to be silenced by someone else's ambition. But I also know what it means to take your name back, your dignity, your rightful place. And I stand here as proof you don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes the paper speaks loudest, or speaks. The room stood still, then applause, and somewhere deep inside me, I felt Gran's smile, because this was the version of me she always believed in. Not just a student, not just a survivor, but a force, one built on evidence, and integrity, and earned fire. After the ceremony, I walked outside into the warm Carolina night. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you," to myself, to the version of me that kept going, to the silence that became strength. I never heard from Amelia again. I didn't need to. Her name no longer had weight in my story. She had been a plot twist, not the final page. I graduated from law school with distinction, started a legal education program for high school girls in underfunded districts, taught them what rights meant, how to defend them, how to recognize when someone's stealing your story, and how to take it back. One of the girls, Jada, age 16, stood up at the end of our last session and said, "Miss Brooks, you make me believe that smart can look like us." That sentence split something open in me, because that's what Amelia tried to steal. Not just my scholarship, but my reflection, my right to be powerful in my own shape. And now, that power was multiplying, not through revenge, but through restoration. That fall, I was offered a position as a junior legal advisor at the South Carolina Ethics Council. I accepted, because the truth is our systems only get better when people who were wronged step into them and make them right. On my first day, I walked through the same doors where, once upon a time, Amelia had pretended to be me. But this time there was no pretense, no mask, just me, Natalie Brooks. Full name, full voice, full circle. As I sat down at my desk, I placed one thing beside my computer. Gran's handwritten list, faded, worn, but still legible, still mine. I had it laminated, preserved like a legal exhibit, because it was Exhibit A in the case of, she took my place, but I took the legal rights. And in the end, those rights gave me everything. My name, my path, my future. So if you're listening somewhere in the middle of your own quiet war, hear this. You don't need to scream. You don't need to beg. You need to believe. And document. And wait. Because when the dust settles, the truth will still be standing. And if you've built yourself on that truth, so will you. Months passed. The rhythm of my new life felt solid, like stepping into a suit that had always been mine, just waiting for me to grow into it. Each morning, I stood before the mirror, not to fix myself, but to remind myself I no longer had to disappear behind someone else's version of me. One morning, as I reviewed a draft bill for academic ethics reform, an email pinged. Subject Speaking Invitation National Legal Resilience Summit. They wanted me to deliver the keynote. I reread it 3 times. Me, a girl who had once been erased, now being asked to lead a room full of legislators, judges, educators. I accepted. And weeks later, I stood on a stage in Washington, D.C. This time, I didn't shake. This time, I didn't whisper. I told them everything. Not just about Amelia, but about what happens when systems fail, when institutions let someone's charm overwrite someone else's truth. I told them about accountability, about how fraud doesn't always look like forged checks. Sometimes it looks like forged identities. And if we don't protect the quiet kids, the ones who follow the rules, who don't scream when they're wronged, we risk losing the very integrity we claim to defend. After the talk, a man approached me, gray-haired, polished. He introduced himself as a university trustee. He said, "Your story should be required reading. You didn't just recover. You redefined what it means to win." That night, I walked through the city lights, thinking, this isn't about revenge. It never really was. It's about legacy. It's about what you build after the silence, and how loudly that foundation can speak. I went back to Charleston that weekend. Stopped by the house Gran once lived in. New family owned it now. Kids in the yard, laughter in the air. And instead of sadness, I felt something else. Continuity. Gran's gift to me had grown, rooted, become a tree that now offered shade to others. Not just a scholarship, but a story. Not just a legal win, but a living example of how you take yourself back. Completely. Legally? Forever. As I sat in the car, watching the sun hit the porch rails, I opened my journal. Wrote one line. They tried to give her my name, but I made it unforgettable.